have played almost every main Koei Warriors games. When I say main Koei Warriors games, I mean Dynasty Warriors, Samurai Warriors, and Warriors Orochi. I have played a good amount of spin-off Koei Warriors games as well, such as the One Piece Pirate Warrior series and the Fist of the North Star Ken's Rage series. As of the last 5 years, I would say, the main Koei Warriors games have been under heavy criticism from its own core community. Now, when I say heavy criticism, I am not saying criticism from the mainstream video game community who never played any Warriors games and just assume that all Warriors games are the same. I'm talking about criticism from longtime fans such as you and I. Main Warriors games that came out recently such as Dynasty Warriors 9, Warriors Orochi 4, and Samurai Warriors 5 had amount of harsh yet fair criticisms. A lot of the longtime fans believe that Koei-Tecmo has been putting less and less effort to the main Warriors games. Problems that came out from these games are the following. Technical issues, mainly in Dynasty Warriors 9. The game had a horrendous launch, and technical issues are still present even today. Characters being cloned in Dynasty Warriors 9 and Samurai Warriors 5. While these games were promoted to be a revamp of the series, instead of evolving the combat system with unique movesets for every character, they decided to be cheap and give almost everyone a shared moveset. It's even more puzzling in Samurai Warriors 5 because they cut the roster and still cloned the characters. This just really shows how lazy and cheap Koei-Tecmo is. Lack of gameplay mode and other content, especially in Warriors Orochi 4 and Samurai Warriors 5. For games that came out in 2018 and 2020, Koei-Tecmo delivered less content than their games that came out in the mid-2000s and early 2010s. Horrendous DLC practices. This is not exclusive towards Koei Warriors games. This has been a running theme from Koei-Tecmo. However, games like Dynasty Warriors 9 took the step for the worse. They literally cloned characters' weapon just to sell their original weapons back as DLCs. It's a scummy practice no matter where you look at it. These are valid criticism that needs to be addressed by the community to Koei-Tecmo. For your information, I tried to address some of these issues in regards to the main Koei Warriors games in their Koei-Tecmo global Discord server. However, I was noted that the people who runs the server wanted me banned because to them, I complain too much about their poor PC ports. They even have a rule in the server where you are not allowed to say anything negative about their games. I'm making this video not because I want to bitch about Koei Warriors games for the sake of bitching alone. I want to have an open discussion with all of you Koei Warriors fans on what Koei-Tecmo can do to improve their main Warriors games. I'm going to share my ideas as well that I have been discussing on my Discord server. So I want to have a constructive criticism at the end of the day. I do believe that constructive criticism is always a good thing. As a fan of the Warrior series, I do not want to see the series crash and burn. On the contrary, I do want to see it succeed. I have been a fan of the series for 20 years now. These are some of my ideas that I would do to improve the main Koei Warrior series. I do want to hear from you guys as well. This is an open discussion at the end of the day. I'm not strictly saying my ideas are all good and perfect, as maybe you guys can come up with better ideas. I have divided aspects on how Koei-Tecmo can improve their main Warriors games into 3 different categories. 1. AI difficulty improvement. 2. Gameplay improvement. And 3. Presentation improvement. I divide it into 3 categories because these are the major complaints that I have heard the most from the community. This is going to be quite a ride, ladies and gentlemen. So here are the 10 ways Koei-Tecmo can improve their Warriors games. One of the most common complaints I have heard in regards to the modern Warriors games is the difficulty. I keep hearing people in the community say that Warriors games are too easy now and how they wish the AI were more aggressive like they were in Dynasty Warriors 3 or Dynasty Warriors 4. In regards to the difficulty, I do agree that the newer Warriors games had their AI toned down. This mainly because of a different overall game design. In older games such as Dynasty Wars 3, you have less enemies on screen. With less enemies on screen, you can have an aggressive AI as the challenge. In newer games such as Samurai Wars 5, you have a lot of enemies on screen, thus the AI is toned down to make the overall game balance. You can't have Samurai Wars 5 numbers of enemies with Dynasty Wars 3 AI aggressiveness. That would break the game, honestly. However, I do mostly agree that the newer game's challenge is way too toned down. My biggest issue with the difficulty is that the challenge doesn't revolve around how smart the AI is, but how much the AI can give and receive damage. Difficulty settings in modern Warriors games is basically adjustment to how much an AI can take damage on you and how much you can give damage to an AI. For example, in Dynasty Warriors 8, let's say, in normal mode, an enemy general can damage you with a Musou attack down to 70% of your HP. Meanwhile, in ultimate mode, the same enemy general can end your life with the same Musou attack. On the other hand, enemies take less damage from you in higher difficulty. This is a common trope in games like Warriors OG 4, Samurai Warriors 4, Dynasty Wars 9, and others. Basically, enemies are not more aggressive, they are just tankier and more buffed. The challenge in modern Warriors games for higher difficulty is basically you need to make sure to keep attacking them and avoid getting one-shot by the enemy. I agree that this isn't what you call challenging, this is more annoying. So the question is, what would I do to improve the AI difficulty? One way that I would do is to decrease the number of enemies on screen. One of the biggest gripes of having too many enemies on screen is that you really need to tone down the AI's aggressiveness. Samurai Warriors 5 is a good example. Nightmare difficulty in that game is an absolute cakewalk, even when your character is not even maxed. You have hundreds of enemies on screen just waiting to be slaughtered. All you need to do in that game is to keep attacking and make sure enemy generals don't one-shot you. Not to mention, with way too many enemies on screen, enemy soldiers look like they are smaller. With lowering the number of enemies on screen, I do believe that Warriors games could make for a more challenging gameplay. You can, quote-unquote, smarten up the enemies, you might say. Another question that comes up with lowering the number of enemies would be, should the gameplay be grounded as it was back in the PS2 Warriors games? My answer would be no. Honestly, although I wanted Warriors games to have smarter AI and less enemies on screen, I do not want to go back to the old grounded gameplay as they were in the PS2 days. I feel like that kind of gameplay is outdated. Sengoku Basara games did it right, honestly, when it comes to the difficulty. The game is very high-paced, over-the-top action as the modern Warriors games, but they are not cheap when it comes to the difficulty. They have a lot of enemies on screen, but not as many as later Koei Warriors games like Samurai Warriors 5 or Dynasty Warriors 9. Honestly, I do believe Koei-Tecmo is able to make the gameplay challenging without compromising the high-paced action of the Warriors games. They've done it before in games like Fist of the North Star Ken's Rage, Hyrule Warriors, and even Warriors Orgy 3 in my opinion. Those games are challenging for the right reason. It's not like Koei-Tecmo can't do it, it's just that they refuse to do it somehow for their main Warriors games. Now, is reducing the number of enemies on screen itself enough to make the game more challenging? The answer is no. There are more that needs to be done. Reducing the number of enemies is just the first step that they could do, which leads me to my second point. I always model and consider the Musou genre to be a spiritual successor to classic arcade beat-em-up games. The overall format is very similar. You pick a character, you start the stage, you walk through the stage, you beat up enemies, you fight the boss, and you finally clear the stage. Start a new stage and do it all over again. Now, since Musou games are technically 3D large-scale beat-em-up games, most of the challenge should come from the enemy AI. When I play beat-em-up games like Streets of Rage, I often think that enemies have some kind of rank or hierarchy in terms of their difficulty. Enemy range from being easy scrubs to difficult aggressors. Let's take Streets of Rage 4, for example. I classified enemies into 5 tiers based on their difficulty and intelligence. Low tier enemies, the bottom of the barrel or the scrubs. These are AI that are there for the players to beat up most of the time. They tend to get tougher in later stages and their intelligence slightly increases as well. These are your Galcias, Donovans, and Y-Signals. Mid-tier enemies. These are slightly stronger scrubs, but scrubs nonetheless. These AI can screw you sometimes when you're not careful. These are your Dylans, Garnets, Victorias, and the Cops. High-tier enemies. Strong enemies that could hold their ground against you. Although they are henchmen AI, but they can put quite a fight against you. These are your Muay Thai guys, Karate guys, Biker ladies, and gunmen. Semi-bosses. They are sub-bosses or mid-stage bosses. These are smarter AI and provide you with a decent amount of challenge. These are your Skull Robots, Fat Boys, or any other bosses that are downgraded to mid-stage fights. Bosses. These are your hardest challenge in the game. They are the most intelligent and aggressive AI that you fight last in every stage. Every stage in all of the Streets of Rage games has a boss fight. Now that we classified enemy AI into 5 different tiers, we can similarly apply that towards enemy AI in Musou games. By having less enemies on screen, we can focus on AI priority in terms of their intelligence level. So let's classify enemies in Musou games with the same tiers as we did in Streets of Rage. Low tier enemies. These are your scrubs or peons who are there to get beat up. Therefore, these are your privates, sergeants, and captains. Mid tier enemies. Slightly stronger and more intelligent scrubs, but scrubs nonetheless. As I said, if not careful, they can screw you up. These will be your special units like archers, bombardiers, engineers, and any other special type of troopers. High tier enemies. AI with a decent amount of intelligence and aggressiveness. These can be your generic officers. Semi-bosses. They are enemies that are almost boss level threat. These will be your playable officers as enemy generals. Example would be Zhang Liao at Hulao Gate, Huang Gai at Chebi, or Zhao Yun at Changban. Bosses. The toughest challenge in the game that you fight at the end of the stage. These are your enemy commanders like Zhang Jiao in Yellow Turban Rebellion, Cao Cao at Chebi, or Lu Bu at Xiapi. Now, before you say things like 2D beat-em-up games and 3D Musou games can't be compared, well, yes and no. They are not comparable directly. However, I do believe that having a tier of enemy AI could work for Warriors games from Koei-Tecmo. Additional talk here, guys. As you guys know, I've been playing a lot of TMNT Shredder's Revenge. I suggest you play that game as well. That game is basically a 2D styled Musou game. I know that Warriors games are known to be a 1 versus 1000 action game where you basically kill as many enemies as possible on screen. However, I do believe Warriors games need to provide players with a decent challenge as well. I'm not too keen with the idea that you can one-shot enemy generals, especially when they are the commanders. Which leads me to my next point. One of the most challenging things of a beat-em-up or a hack-and-slash game is boss fights. Bosses are the toughest enemies that you must fight at the end of every stage. That's how it should be. Your biggest challenge that prevents you from finishing the stage should be faced at the end of every stage. The main Koei Warriors games like Dynasty and Samurai Warriors games should apply the same thing as well. Enemy commanders should be their own boss fights. I've lost count on how many times I have said during my streams, I really don't like that you can one-shot enemy commanders in games like Warriors Orgy 4 or Samurai Warriors 5, especially when you play it in highest difficulty. Take Samurai Warriors 5 for example. I was playing as a level 30 Kikawa Motoharu at the Great Iga Uprising, a 9-star stage in Nightmare difficulty. In that gameplay, I was able to one-shot Matsunaga Hisahide, the final enemy of the stage, with an R1 ability and an attack times 2 skill. Now, some of you may argue that I crafted the best weapon as possible, that's why I'm able to one-shot the enemy commander. However, I need to remind you guys as well that I am still using a base weapon for Motoharu. This is still the weakest weapon among all of the heavy spear type. Also, regardless of character and weapon stats, one-shotting an enemy commander should never be a thing. I'm not even using the Musou Frenzy here, I'm just using an R1 ability. Again, I need to remind you, this is a 9-star stage at Nightmare difficulty. You are able to one-shot the enemy commander of the stage. Enemy commanders should always be treated as a major threat to the gameplay. No matter how powerful your character is, you should never be able to one-shot enemy commanders, especially in the highest difficulty. Look at Sengoku Basara games. I'm taking Sengoku Basara 2 Heroes for example. Enemy commanders in that game are treated as their own boss fights. Most times, especially in higher difficulty, commanders are tough to fight. Granted, they might not be as crazy as other hack and slash boss fights like in God of War or Devil May Cry, but at the very least, it's a challenge for what it is. You don't just one-shot them to win. Honestly, it's not like Koei-Tecmo can't do boss fights in Musou games. Take a look at Fist of the North Star Ken's Rage for example. Almost every end of the stage, you have a boss fight. The same can be said about their other spin-off games such as One Piece Pirate Warriors. Those games treated commanders as boss fights. If Koei-Tecmo can have enemy commanders as their own boss fights in their spin-off games, why can't they have them in Dynasty or Samurai Warriors games? Make Cao Cao an epic boss battle chibi when you play as a character in the Allied Forces. Make him a legit badass threat to your player's character. Don't treat the enemy commanders as slightly tankier peons. Having enemy commanders as their own boss fights, in my opinion, could provide players with a decent challenge. It worked for their other Musou games, and I do believe it could work for Dynasty and Samurai Warriors games if Koei-Tecmo would put effort into making it work. If I am in charge of a new Warriors game, this is something I will immediately remove from the series altogether. This is something that has overstayed its welcome in Dynasty Warriors and had no business whatsoever being in Samurai Warriors. Weapon switching system needs to go, and it should never come back in any Warriors games. The idea of a character wielding another character's weapon and using another character's moveset as well really makes the entire point of playing a certain character pointless. Characters are nothing more than skins if they are able to use everyone's moveset. Characters are devoid of personality as well if they are able to use different weapons and moveset. I know I use this game often in this video, but let's take a look again at Sengoku Basara. Personally, Sengoku Basara does a lot of things right in the gameplay department. In Sengoku Basara, characters' moveset are very expressive in my opinion. Weapons and moveset are very close to a character's personality. Capcom did a really good job to express characters' personality with their moveset. For example, Yukimura's moveset shows how much of an aggressive hothead he is. Masamune's moveset shows his wild yet badass personality. Nobunaga's moveset shows his ruthlessness as the Demon King, and don't get me even started on Ashikage Yoshiteru. Also guys, I want you to check out this channel here, Tomo Hayabusa. He does compilation movesets for Musou games, whether it's Dynasty Warriors, Samurai Warriors, Warriors Orochi, in Sengoku Basara, or even the other spin-off Musou games. Now, I want to show you guys that he made a compilation of Sengoku Basara Yukimura Den. Each character's moveset is almost or more than 10 minutes long. 10 minutes of video for one character's moveset. That's how in-depth Sengoku Basara's moveset is. Basically, characters' moveset really showed their, well, character. Now, imagine if Sengoku Basara has weapons or moveset switching system. Do you see someone like Yukimura wielding Nobunaga's weapon or even using Nobunaga's moveset? That would look out of place because it doesn't fit Yukimura's character. How about Kenshin wielding Masamune's weapon? That wouldn't look out of place, would it? Oh, How about something cursed? Imagine Matsunaga Hisahide doing stripper dance moves like Kasuga when you give him her weapons. Weapon switching system is also a cheap way for Koei-Tecmo to have clones. It's 2022 now, and clones should never be a thing in Koei Warriors games, regardless of the reasons. It's okay to have characters with similar weapons, but completely different moveset. But only having 2 unique attacks and 1 specific R1 abilities is not enough to make characters unique. They still have the same main normal and charge attacks. The Warrior series should evolve. Clones in Warriors games is not an evolution, it is going backwards in a bad way. In the end, I will always advocate for Koei Warriors games to remove weapon switching system altogether. I strongly believe that weapon switching system makes characters devoid of any form of personality. There is this one notion that I strongly disagree with the Warriors community. I always keep hearing this notion from people who claim that they are longtime fans of the series. Dynasty Warriors should go back on how they were in the PS2 days, such as Dynasty Warriors 3 and Dynasty Warriors 4. Dynasty Warriors games must be grounded and must be historically accurate to be good. The game shouldn't be over-the-top action or anime-ish like Basara games. Now, I was in that mentality as well. However, my point of view changed after revisiting the Warriors games I grew up with. I don't want to go on a fanboy war because of this, but I strongly disagree with this statement. Don't get me wrong on this, I don't hate the PS2 era Dynasty Warriors games. I still like those games for what it is. However, I do believe that Warriors games as a whole has evolved, and it should evolve. Games like Dynasty Warriors 3 and Dynasty Warriors 4 are good games for that time. It's good for nostalgia and throwback moments, but I strongly believe that we have passed the time for Warriors games being grounded. Now, back in 2008, I was a young boy who is crazy with the current Koei Warriors games at the time. I played the hell out of Dynasty Warriors 5, Samurai Warriors 2, and Warriors Orochi during those times. That was until I was introduced to Sengoku Basara 2 Heroes. Sengoku Basara 2 Heroes was my introduction to the Basara series. Ever since then, my point of view for the Warrior series has changed. When I play Sengoku Basara 2 Heroes, I thought of myself, this is what Warriors games should be in the future. Sengoku Basara 2 Heroes does a lot of things right compared to the Koei Warriors games of the PS2. Number 1. The combat is very colorful and very fast-paced. The game is self-aware that it doesn't take itself seriously, so Capcom just went crazy with the gameplay. Number 2. Graphics-wise, this is no doubt the best looking Musou game on the PS2. Look at it! The environment, textures, character design, and it even has clothing physics. Number 3. This game has the best performance when it comes to Musou games on the PS2. The game is stable and I rarely find any lags or slowdown in Sengoku Basara 2 Heroes, so the game has both good graphics and good performance. And more things that Capcom did right with Sengoku Basara 2 Heroes that are too much to fit in one video. Honestly, after playing Sengoku Basara 2 Heroes on the PS2, I rarely went back and revisit Musou games that came out before Dynasty Warriors 5. Dynasty Warriors 5, Samurai Warriors 2, and the 2 Warriors Orochi games are the only classic PS2 Musou games that I constantly came back to. However, talking about that could be a separate video in itself. With the presence of Sengoku Basara series, I felt like Koei went to a similar approach in their main Warriors games, starting with Dynasty Warriors 7. Musou attacks were changed in Dynasty Warriors 7. They were no longer just strings of repeated attack. Instead, it's one powerful cinematic attack that wipes out enemies on screen, similar to that of the Basara games. In my personal opinion, I think this was a good direction for the series. Koei-Tecmo really needs to make characters' moveset fun and unique while keeping the difficulty of these games challenging as well. You don't need to be grounded like the older games to make the games challenging, as I have already given some ideas on how to do so. Now, I'm not saying that Dynasty or Samurai Warriors games should go full crazy and way over the top like Basara games in terms of weapons and moveset. I do think Dynasty and Samurai Warriors games should have some level of ground. What I'm proposing is for Koei-Tecmo to be more creative with the combat as what Capcom did with Basara. Another thing that Koei-Tecmo needs to consider when it comes to making characters' moveset fun and unique is that moveset needs to be distributed in a balanced manner. They tried to that approach in Samurai Warriors 5, where each weapon's moveset has its own style instead of following a certain pattern like in their previous games. However, moveset were poorly distributed in that game. In Samurai Warriors 5, some weapons seriously got shafted really hard. The spear is the best example for this. Why does the spear have less moveset than all the other weapons? Look at this moveset. The spear only has 5 string combos in its maximum level, by the way. Don't give me that shit that the spear is a horse-oriented weapon. You shouldn't have to compromise ground moveset for the sake of making a horse-oriented weapon. 95% of Musou games are played when characters are on foot. The horse is mainly used as a transportation method from one point to another point. Not to mention, in Samurai Warriors 5, hyper attack exists. The spear's hyper attack can be faster than the horse. Koei-Tecmo was able to do fun and unique movesets with their other Musou titles such as Hyrule Warriors, One Piece Pirate Warriors, and Persona 5 Strikers, to name a few. All they need to do is to apply them in the main Dynasty and Samurai Warriors games. What Koei-Tecmo needs to do, honestly, is be creative and go all out when it comes to the character's moveset. I can't stress enough how Basara games did a pretty good job in that department. It is something that Koei-Tecmo really needs to take notice, and in some aspects of their modern games, they have already done it. Though it's not as polished as how Capcom applied it in Basara games. One thing I like about how Koei-Tecmo approached Dynasty Warriors 7 and Dynasty Warriors 8 is that characters have more than one Musou tags. Each character in Dynasty Warriors 8 has 3 different Musou tags. I really do like the idea of characters earning new Musou tags as you progress and level up. Now, Dynasty Warriors 7 wasn't the first game to introduce this idea. Fist of the North Star Ken's Rage implemented this idea before Dynasty Warriors 7. In that game, you can unlock new Musou attacks as you progress your character. In Ken's Rage, different Musou attacks will cost different number of Musou bars. Usually, stronger Musou attacks will cost more Musou bars. Other Koei games have applied this mechanic as well, such as One Piece Pirate Warriors 3. Different Musou attacks cost different amount of Musou bars. Koei-Tecmo can easily apply this system in their main Dynasty and Samurai Warriors games, especially Samurai Warriors. Excluding the Musou Frenzy, Samurai Warriors games always have one Musou attack for each character. In Samurai Warriors and some Dynasty Warriors games, characters have up to 3 Musou bars. The amount of Musou bars represent the amount of Musou attacks you can do. For games like Dynasty Warriors 7 and Dynasty Warriors 8, characters can unlock more Musou attacks as you progress. However, all of the Musou attacks only cost 1 Musou bar. What Koei-Tecmo can do, in my opinion, have the stronger Musou attacks cost more Musou bars. So, in general, each character has up to 4 Musou attacks. Level 1 Musou, Level 2 Musou, Level 3 Musou, and a Musou Rage. What I would do as well is make Musou Rage an unlockable skill. Since Musou Rage is the most powerful Musou attack, characters need to unlock all 3 Musou attacks first before they can unlock the Musou Rage. It would make for a more challenging gameplay if you ask me, and progressing characters would be more rewarding. Musou attacks needs to be powerful, but it shouldn't be too powerful to the point where it compromises the difficulty. Musou Rage should be the most powerful attack, but you still shouldn't be able to use the attack to one-shot enemy commanders or bosses. Having different Musou attack levels in the main Dynasty and Samurai Warriors games is a good way to add more depth in the combat, in my opinion. But at the same time, Koei-Tecmo should not compromise the difficulty of the game. So this is something that Koei applied in Warriors Orochi, but they never applied it in their main Warriors games. Specific teams can perform specific unique Musou attacks. This system should have been applied in Samurai Warriors 4 and Samurai Warriors 5, honestly, considering you play as two characters in those games. Specific pairs, for example, Nobunaga and Mitsuhide, should have had a unique Musou attack that is not just their individual Musou attacks being done together. They actually applied this system in the mobile version of Dynasty Warriors 7, Dynasty Warriors Overlords. In that game, when a certain character performs a Musou attack near another character that has a relationship with that said character, they will perform a completely unique Musou attack.
There you go. This one is probably the most creative one. Just having the attack be just collateral damage, that's very creative. It's awesome, I guess, thematically because it's Machao versus Wang Yi. I wouldn't give it higher than an 8. I'd probably give that one an 8. It wasn't bad. It's like a callback to like the Sworn Oath or whatever. See, it's cool, I like it, but in comparison to the others, this is like a 7.
Here's what I would do to apply the system. In the main Dynasty and Samurai Warriors games, you play as two characters. One character is your primary, the other character is your secondary. Now, you have 3 different Musou bars. The first bar is for your character's Musou attack, the second bar is for your character's Musou Rage, and the third bar is for your character's Tag Team Musou attack. When you are playing single player mode, in order to fill up the Tag Team Musou bar, you need to command your second character to perform certain tasks or stratagems. It's something similar to how the bodyguard system works in Dynasty Warriors 8. Now, when you are playing co-op mode, to fill up the Tag Team Musou bar, each player must perform their individual Musou attacks close to each other. Once again, that's just how I would do it. I need to remind you as well, Tag Team Musou attacks need to be powerful, but it shouldn't compromise the difficulty of the game. Koei-Tecmo must not have Tag Team Musou attacks to be too powerful, to the point where you can one-shot enemy commanders. With all that being said, at the end of the day, I do believe that Koei-Tecmo can make the entire combat fun, fresh, action-packed, but at the same time, keeping the difficulty balance. That is only if Koei-Tecmo actually put more thought and effort into applying them. This entry is strictly applied for the Dynasty Warrior series. Now, I want to give credit where credit is due for Samurai Warriors 5. I do like the idea that Samurai Warriors 5 focuses only in the era of Oda Nobunaga instead of the entire Sengoku Jidai. The idea was good on paper because it has potential to improve the combat, story, and everything else. However, the execution was very underwhelming. Samurai Warriors 5 cut almost everything while barely improved on the things that they needed to improve. Samurai Warriors 5 not only cut the roster, it also has clone moveset, which was poorly distributed as well, clone stages, less game modes, less motion cutscenes, and no, text cutscenes do not count as motion cutscenes for me. Hell, the game didn't even have a pre-title cutscene. Regardless, I would apply something similar in Samurai Warriors 5 in terms of the story to the Dynasty Warrior series. I would reboot the Dynasty Warrior series and turn it into a trilogy. 3 Dynasty Warriors games that covered 3 different eras of the 3 kingdoms. This is what I would do. Dynasty Warriors 1. The game will cover the story of the Han Dynasty's fall. The story will go from the Yellow Turban Rebellion until the Battle of Cherbi. Characters that debuted after Cherbi will not make an appearance in this game. Dynasty Warriors 2. The game will cover the story of the establishment of the 3 kingdoms. The story will go from the Jing province conflict until the Battle of Wujiang Plains. Characters that died before Cherbi and has not debuted after Wujiang Plains will not make an appearance in this game. Dynasty Warriors 3. The game will cover the story of the later era as well as the end of the Three Kingdoms. The Sima clan will be the main protagonist of the game. The story will go from Gongsun Yuan's rebellion all the way until the fall of Wu. Having 3 different games that cover different eras of the Three Kingdoms is beneficial in my opinion. You have a reason to have less characters in the game. Not only that, it gives Koei-Tecmo and Omega Force more breathing room to improve the combat, the difficulty, the presentation, and other aspects as well. It's something that they should have done in Samurai Warriors 5. Instead, they used the Nobunaga era focused game excuse to cut corners and content even more. I do think cutting the roster for Warriors games and having a specific era focused game is a good thing. However, just cutting the roster alone without improving on anything else is something I strongly disagree on. It needs to improve the combat and the overall presentation as well. Dividing the Dynasty Warriors series into a trilogy, I do believe will give a better breathing room for Koei-Tecmo and Omega Force to improve with the series overall. This has been severely missing in a lot of the newer main Koei Warriors games. Whatever happened to the game modes such as Extreme Mode, Destiny Mode, Versus Mode, Survival Mode, New Officer Mode, Mercenary Mode, Musou Battlefield Mode, Ambition Mode, and other modes? Hell, I would love if Koei-Tecmo bring back side game modes like Sugoroku Mode. At least it's something. Now, if it was up to me, I would have modes specifically designed for created characters like Destiny Mode or New Officer Mode. What I would do with these modes is to make them more rewarding as well, so that you would have a reason to play these modes. Let's say, you have Destiny Mode back in Dynasty Warriors. In Dynasty Warriors 5, you can unlock more character customization part from this mode. I would take a step further with this mode. Here's what I would do. You can unlock second rare weapons for playable characters in this mode. You unlock the first rare weapons by playing story mode or free mode with the respective characters, while you unlock the second rare weapons by completing certain objectives as you serve a specific character of a faction in Destiny mode. You can unlock retro costumes for playable characters in this mode. How about having the ability to unlock costumes from older games instead of constantly relying on DLCs for once? That way, people would have more reason to play the game. You can unlock rare items in this mode. So, some items are unlockable in the main modes while others are unlockable in this mode. Whatever it is, Koei-Tecmo needs to have extra modes in their main Warriors games. It is something that was really missing in a lot of modern Warriors games. Also, Citadel mode sucks in Samurai Warriors 5. It's nothing but glorified short defense battles. This is something that we haven't seen in the main Koei Warriors games since Samurai Warriors 3, which came out way back in 2010. Victory pose for each characters is something that really needs to come back. I feel like Koei-Tecmo should have brought them back in Samurai Warriors 5 considering that game has a roster cut. Although victory poses may not seem special, but it does feel very rewarding to see your character celebrating his or her victory. It also gives more personality to each character. Honestly, I would go a step even further. How about having character intro scenes before you start a battle? It's something that Koei-Tecmo applied in Ken's Rage. When you start a stage on Dream Mode, you have an intro cutscenes for your playable character as he's about to start the battle. Hell, they actually applied intro cutscenes in Dynasty Warriors Overlords. When you pick a character in that game, you get treated with an intro cutscene. Granted, not all of them look good, but it's still a unique thing to see. Like I said previously, it gives more personality to the characters. If Koei-Tecmo wanted to bring something back from their older games, victory poses should definitely make a comeback. Now, this one is a short entry. I made this one after I was done editing all 10 entries. I was playing co-op in Sengoku Basara 2 Heroes with a friend, and I had to put this one aspect on the video as well. In Sengoku Basara, you are able to revive your teammate When you play co-op in this game, if one player dies, the game doesn't immediately end like in Koei Warriors games. You can actually revive your fallen comrade in battle. It's something I wish Koei-Tecmo would apply in their Warriors games. I don't really like the idea of having separate health bars in co-op only for the game to be over when one of the players dies. I don't think the game should stop if one player dies during co-op. This video has been something I really wanted to make with a passion. As I said in the intro of this video, I am a fan of the Warrior series for 20 years now. It's a series that I am truly passionate with, and I really want to see the series improve to even greater heights. This video is a result of discussion with people who shares multiple point of views within the Musou community. I wanted to make sure that we have a discussion at the end of the day. Some of you may disagree with my takes here, as you may have a different opinion in regards to the series overall. Do let me know what you guys think on the comment section below. I am very open to a discussion and would consider difference of thoughts. I don't want to shit too much on the Koei Warriors games just for the sake of it. There are some things I don't know behind the scenes in Koei-Tecmo. This video's purpose is to give possible suggestions on what Koei-Tecmo could do to make improvements on their main Warrior series. Honestly, a lot of these suggestions are not even new concept of the series. Now before I leave, there is one more argument that I need to counter. I keep hearing this argument very often as well. When Koei-Tecmo tried to change or innovate their main Warrior series like Dynasty Warriors 6 and Dynasty Warriors 9, they only resulted in backlash from the fans. The fans just disliked them for being different. So Koei-Tecmo can't really innovate because it's only going to result in failure and fans hating it. I need to stress you guys that games like Dynasty Warriors 6, Dynasty Warriors 9, and Samurai Warriors 5 weren't failures because they were simply different. Koei-Tecmo wanted to do something different, but they rushed them before they were even fully developed. I am not convinced when someone say to me that Dynasty Warriors 9 wasn't a rushed game. It is a rushed game, no doubt. The fact that they released a buggy mess like Dynasty Warriors 9 for $60 at launch is insulting. In that aspect, people have all the rights to complain. To say that fans dislike them for just being different is a very ignorant point of view. There are possibly more things I could say in regards to what Koei-Tecmo can do to improve the series, but this video is already longer than it is. With that being said, everyone, this is me, Profar. Do let me know if I missed something that need to be said in regards to improvement of the Warrior series. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you dislike it, give me a thumbs down. Join the Profar Mokuri Hunter X Discord server, link is in the description below. Thank you guys for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.